Hello, my name is Ashton Burrell, and I am one of the co-chairs for the Middlesex County Black and Jewish Coalition.
Hi, I'm Norma Vargas-Greenberg, and I'm the co-chair of the coalition.
The Middlesex County Black and Jewish Coalition was created to help build bridges and create dialogue as well as advocacy in the Black and Jewish communities in Middlesex County. We thank you guys for joining us today for our first virtual program, which is called Hear Thy Neighbor, which is a collection of dialogues between individuals that are Black and Jewish and live in Middlesex County. We hope you enjoy the program, and we look forward to continuing to have you build with us. We hope you enjoy. Without further ado, here's our program, Hear Thy Neighbor.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Cypess, and I'm a member of the Middlesex County Black-Jewish Coalition. It's my great pleasure to introduce Borough Council Member Elsie Foster of Highland Park, New Jersey. Council Member Foster was first sworn into the Borough Council 20 years ago, November 2000, and she's also served as Council President in the past. Council Member Foster, it's such a great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for joining us. I was wondering if you might start by telling us what brought you to Central New Jersey. Why did you choose Highland Park?
First, I want to say thank you for having me, and looking forward to this interesting discussion and what the coalition hopes to accomplish in building bridges and getting us to know each other better. What brings me to Highland Park? When I decided to start a family, we started looking for places to live. And being from Jamaica, I wanted a place that was small where, people get to really know each other, small town atmosphere where you can have easy access to a lot of facilities and to your downtown and walking, thriving community. And Highland Park came up pretty strong where the schools were concerned, because education is a huge factor. So in 1994, when I looked at Highland Park, and I was like, the schools here are pretty good. It's a quiet, safe town. And it seems like everyone get along for the most part as an outsider looking in. And that was my number one. The school did it for me. Being in a small school environment where the educational standards were pretty good and a quiet, safe town, that was my number one driving source to come to Highland Park, because I knew I was going to have a family.
Wonderful. And what did you find when you got here? What was life like when you first moved in?
Life was interesting when I finally got settled in. Before I finally got settled in, actually, that summer of '94 when I came and we were moving in, and as with all new homeowners, you have a permanent residency at Home Depot or Lowe's, because you're there 4 times a day, as we all know that everyone, get a new home or a new apartment, you're in Lowe's or Home Depot all the time. And as I made my daily treks to these stores, it was in July that I remember that I was coming through town by Krauser's to come on to Woodbridge Avenue. And I got the not so welcome by our police department. They did not roll out the red carpet, unfortunately. So I got stopped on Woodbridge Avenue and was asked, what am I doing here? I said, I just bought the house. Officer did not believe that I lived in town because my driver's license didn't say Highland Park. And so the welcoming into Highland Park by the police department was not great. And away from that, the rest of the folks in town, the borough did something really interesting at the time. They used to have a welcome packet for all new home residents. And I guess a lot of towns did have welcome packets where they sent you, where's Borough Hall, where is this, where the library, where your resources were. So, and then those blue garbage bins, you got a blue garbage bin when you moved to town. So that was pretty cool. As corny as it sounded, it was pretty cool that you moved into town, you got your welcome package and your blue garbage bin. And
That's great.
You have mine. So that part of it was good. I love Highland Park. And this is why I serve here on the council in Highland Park, because it became a place, it became home. And a part of it becoming home, and for things to come full circle, when I first started, when my son was about 5 years old, he had started Irving School. And at 5, when he started Irving, we were, I volunteered for everything. I was the cupcake mom. I was the Halloween. I was clean the brushes mom. I did everything. I
have no trouble believing that.
It was just like, I was a little kid in the school. And then I remember someone saying, I went to the PTO meetings and I wanted to know what PTO did and what they were all about. And this was really interesting. There was this woman in the PTO meeting and she was like, does anyone know who Brandon mom is? And they were talking over coffee. And they was like, we really don't like Brandon mom. And I was like, why do they like Brandon? I'm listening. And they was like, she does everything. My son come home, Scott come home, and he said, well, Brandon mom does this, and Brandon mom does that. And why can't you be like Brandon's mom? So I didn't say anything. I went to another 3 meetings, and then they needed someone to serve. We used to do these clothing swaps. And I said, oh, I can help you with that. I have clothing I want to get rid of too. And I did the clothing swap. And it was like, oh, you're really good. And it was like, Elsie, you're really good at this. Never letting them know I'm Brandon's mom, because I'm like, I'm not sure if I like Brandon's mom.
Top secret.
Yeah, it's top secret. And then Brandon showed up at the clothing swap. His friends showed up at the clothing swap, and then Brandon mom was revealed. So it was really interesting. They was like, oh, you're Brandon mom. And then from then on, it was like, oh, we need to call Elsie because she can help us with this. We need to call Elsie. And I started helping, and they asked me, it was an election, I think Meryl Frank was running, and they asked me to help. And I was like, I know nothing about politics. I have no interest in politics, do not want to get involved. And as many women do, we get involved kicking and screaming because we say, oh, we have no knowledge and we don't want to do it because we're not prepared. Meanwhile, you say to a guy, hey, you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, I'm all in, man. And we have to go kicking and screaming, and we have to find a cause to get involved. And it so happened at that time, Buck Woods, which is still on the agenda, was the problem at the time. They wanted us to build 3-bedroom units, townhouses in Buckwoods, starting at, I think, the $300,000 to $400,000. But the kicker was, where the meadows is, where we have the meadows, they wanted us to put up a wall and put up a fence. The wall did not bother me at first, but when I heard a fence, who are you keeping out?
Mm.
What makes who gives you the right to make this so exclusive that you're keeping out people? We should be building bridges, not fences. And it was that fence that got me involved. The fence really infuriated me, and I was all in. After that, I was all in. And I became this voice that would not go away. And because I felt that I moved to this small town that's we're all supposed to get along, and we're supposed to have conversations and, eat milk and cookies or something like that. And here it is that you're going to divide us and put up these fences. And if we didn't have enough problems on our own. And so the fence thing really got me involved. And there was an opening. I went to a Democratic Party meeting at the encouragement of a friend of mine, Sharon, the woman that said, incidentally, she was the one who said, we don't like Brandon mom. And eventually she dragged me to this meeting. I'm like, no, I don't think so. She's like, I just want you to go. I just want you just to listen to these folks. And of course I got there and I couldn't sit still because this fence thing was on my mind and I couldn't let it go. And I had started doing research and to say, why is it that they should not be building in Buckwoods, and all this research and paperwork that I had gathered and called different organizations and started doing a lot of stuff. And I just like let it all hang out one night at one meeting. It was like, oh my God, this woman is too much. That's what they should have said. They actually did, and they thought it was great. And time went on, and before long, they were calling me within, I would say, 6 months and saying, we have an opening on Borough Council, would you be interested? And I'm like, I know nothing about government. I can't do this. I don't understand anything. You know, again, the woman pushback. It's a typical woman's pushback. And I did that, and they said, you can do this. You can do this. You have the skills. You want to learn. You're a quick learner. You can make it happen. And eventually I got roped in, and leads me to today. And here I am. And boy, we went through a lot of changes in town. We went through.
I was going to ask you, what has changed in Highland Park in the 20 years that you've been on council? What hasn't changed, probably, right?
Yeah, well, you know, for people who are in Highland Park today, it seems like hasn't been changes. But for people who have been in Highland Park for a long time, they can see the changes. You know, ironically, when I started at the borough, I believe the borough staff was about 280, almost 300. And there were 4 African Americans, 4 in that entire staff. And I remember that the Department of Public Works, I had gotten some young people from Job Corps to come in and to do some summer internship work. And they were not welcome at all. When they first got there was a Confederate flag being flown. The manager of the department on his knuckles had KKK. And that was interesting. And they were not welcome, and they left. And, you know, there was a lot of work. And, you know, there was even a time when they said that no Black people would ever work in our Department of Public Works. Because if you can remember, traditionally, it was a place for white men. And so that was, to me, that I remember the day when we hired the first African-American man to work in our Department of Public Works. And it was like a huge thing because people were like, oh my God, we saw a Black guy on the truck. You know, and this is just to throw garbage, you know, and it was a big thing. As we talk about integration, housing, teen, recreational, one of the things that I was happy to see come into place was a teen center where the teens can go in. You know, I used to call them latchkey kids, but that's telling on my age. So you have young people that from the ages of, say, 14 to 18 that didn't have any place to go. So they would just go out and hang out nowhere or anywhere. And one of the things that was put in place was the teen center. So they would have a place for themselves to go and to do creative things, such as, you know, they want to do beats for their music. One of them even started a landscaping program. They have artists, they have, you know, there's all these outlets for them to have a place of their own. Another thing that I'm really proud of, and it's our police department. When I came, this is ironic, we had a Black police chief. When I was there, we had a Black police chief, but this is the irony of the whole thing. When we met and we spoke, he said to me, he wants to show me something. I said, oh, this must be good because you're the police chief, you're in town, and he says, I want to show you something. He pulls out his wallet and he pulls out a ticket and he showed it to me. He says he received a ticket as police chief in Highland Park for going 26 miles an hour. So did we have a Black police chief? 26 miles per hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Think about the psychological and mental stuff that man had to go through every day coming into a department where people had so much hatred for him and made his life miserable. That was hard. Well, I said I was proud of the police department. There was the chief and another officer that was there. And now under my watch, under my 20 years, I was able to be a part of the hiring of an Arab officer, Latino officers, African American officers. And I would like to say that we have really expanded and integrated, and we have more diversity. As we say, we love to say in Highland Park, we're so diverse. But now the police department shows some of that diversity that we are, as well as other departments. It was not an easy battle. It was a hard fought battle to get where we are. But we are here. The work is not done. There's a lot more work that needs to be done and has to be done. But it has started. And the energy just have to keep going to make sure that the work that has started, that we keep fighting to make sure that good work is continuing.
Elsie, if there's a message that you want to send to the community, you know, something about what's left to be done, or how should people think about their future, their place in Highland Park or in Middlesex County, what would you say?
The message that I would leave to each and every one of us: we are a country greatly divided, greatly divided. And I believe deep down, we all want the same things. We just have different mechanisms of going about it. We all want to live in peace, harmony, have nice homes, have kids that are educated and have nice things. We want government that works, that truly works for us. And one of the things that it happens over and over and over again, we elect leaders and then we leave them in the wind. And if there was anything that I would like to see, is that when you elect your leaders, that you support them. You come to the meetings, you lend your voice. We work really hard at learning, juggling families and jobs and personal life and everything else, just like you do. And we're trying to build our community. So my message would be, help us build our community, help us build better, help us build those bridges. I didn't get into office to be self-serving. I got into office to fix a problem and to help to make my community, not my family, my community, a better place to live. And if we all take that attitude, that when we see things go wrong, or even when we don't see things go wrong, or even when we have suggestions, to bring those to the table to make better. And to me, that should be our mantra. Our goal is to always make things a bit better for the next person that comes along.
Well, let me take this opportunity then to say thank you. I'll tell you that I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and I've spoken to all 3 of them about you. So they all know who you are and all the contributions, some of the contributions that you've made here. So thank you so much, Councilmember Foster of Highland Park, New Jersey. It's been such a pleasure to hear your stories today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sonya Headlam, a member of the Middlesex County, New Jersey Black-Jewish Coalition, and I have the pleasure today to speak with Rabbi Daniel Loew, principal of a local Jewish day school in Middlesex County, RPRY. Thank you so much, Rabbi Loew, for joining us today. On behalf of everyone in the coalition, we just want to thank you for being with us and sharing your stories with us tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Sonia. It's good to be here.
Please share an anecdote about a formative experience in your life, perhaps something that helped shape the way you think about community, continuity, or tradition.
Sure. So I was raised as an Orthodox Jew, Sabbath observant, Shomer Shabbat Jew. When through 8th grade, I was in Jewish day schools. And, you know, we had neighbors that weren't Jewish, et cetera, but most of my interactions were really with other members of the Jewish community. And then upon my graduation from 8th grade, I went to public high school. And I went from a class of 8 to a class of, I think it was 278.
Wow.
And, you know, obviously, a lot more diversity than I was normally accustomed to. And I've had many formative experiences, but that was certainly one of them, because I think that as a demonstrably Orthodox Jew, I wore a kippah, a yarmulke in public school. It taught me both about the importance of looking beyond my particular community and making bridges and making friends. And, you know, most of my good friends during my public school years were not Jewish, not observant Jews. And at least in school, I was involved with a Jewish youth group outside of school. And you know, so it taught me to look beyond my particular community, but it also taught me what it means to represent my community, wearing a kippah and being essentially judged, you know, as a representative of Jews and of Orthodox Jews. It made me more, I think, self-conscious in a good way, more sensitive about how I present myself, and you know, about the relationships that I'm forming.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And I understand that your grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. What impact did her story have on you?
Growing up until 4th grade, I didn't really think of my grandmother as a Holocaust survivor. I thought of her as my grandmother, you know? And then when I was in, I think it was 4th grade, my Jewish history teacher convinced my grandmother to come and speak to my class. She had never spoken about it before. You know, it was something that she really tried to suppress. Even my mother hadn't really heard too much about it. But my Jewish history teacher convinced my grandmother to come and speak to me and to my classmates. And it was the first time she really told her story. And, you know, of course, she told it in a way that was appropriate for 4th graders, but that was the first time that I think that I recognized that she had lived through something that was really special, different than most people. And that was, you know, really a horrific part of our history that she had lived through. And, you know, her message was always one of tolerance and respect for other people, and that's one of the lessons that we have to learn from the Holocaust. And, you know, that's something that I think I really internalized. And since then, I've heard her speak many more times. That broke the dam. I mean, she's probably spoke hundreds of times since then. She passed away about 2.5 years ago. And here at RPRY, I've only been here for about 5 years. She actually came twice here to speak about her experiences. Even though it was a commute for her. I mean, you know, she lived in Connecticut. So it was, you know, I think it was a real source of pride for me as well to have a grandmother that lived through that, survived it, the strength that it took to you know, to survive and then to rebuild afterwards, you know, and to have a family and to find a place in her heart for optimism and love, and, you know, and to teach those important lessons about tolerance and respect. So, you know, certainly was very formative for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, God rest her soul. And I'm very happy to hear that she had that experience and that ability to share that story in such a meaningful way. And that you were the kind of the catalyst of that starting. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, you were talking a little bit about the school. Maybe you could tell us what made you want to become an educator, and how do you see your role as the principal of RPRY?
So it's funny because when I was after I graduated from high school, which as I mentioned before was a public high school, not a Jewish school. I went to study Torah in Israel for a year. And then I went to Yeshiva University. So I was back in the Jewish institutions, you know. And after my first year in college, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And I ended up choosing to major in biology because I really enjoyed science and was fascinated by it. But then my plan was to go on to become a rabbi. And it was only after that decision that we rediscovered there's this Dr. Seuss book called My Book About Me. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
Right. So I had filled it out. You know, it's this, you know, Dr. Seuss book with it that you actually fill out and you answer all sorts of questions about you and how many spoons are in your house and you know, all sorts of stuff. And we rediscovered that I had written when I was 5 or 6 or whatever that I wanted to become a rabbi when I grew up. So, you know, I guess I really decided well before college that I, you know, that I wanted to become a rabbi. And I think that it was motivated by a couple of experiences. When I was in 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 5th grade, I had the same rabbi as my teacher. It was a very small school in Vestal, New York, and Rabbi Perlman was my teacher those 3 grades. And I just remember associating studying Judaism and Torah with warmth and love and you know, I mean, he literally would embrace us, which you can no longer do. But it was, you know, it was really a positive, warm emotion associated with Judaism and with Torah study. And I think that was definitely one of my formative experiences in choosing to become a rabbi, and then specifically choosing education. When I was in high school, I mentioned earlier that I was very involved with a Jewish youth group, and as part of that, we had all sorts of different types of programs, and I became a leader, a youth leader in the group, et cetera. And some of the programs were social and fun, et cetera, and some of the programs were educational, and those in particular really spoke to me. And I think I viewed my leadership role in the youth group called NCSY, as being able to contribute to my community and to my fellow religionists, my co-religionists, and I think that also sort of led me into wanting to continue to do so by being an educator.
Great, thank you. And I know that each year you choose a theme for educational activities at RPRY. This year, the theme I heard is In the Image of God. What does this mean, and why did you choose this theme?
So when man is created at the very beginning of the Bible, the beginning of the Torah, so God says, let us make man in our image. God says that he's going to create create man, meaning human beings, in his image. And what that means to me is that every human being has to be respected, has to be treated with dignity, and has to be valued for being incredibly precious. We're all made in the image of God. It was actually Rabbi Josh Einzig, who's the Judaic Studies principal at RPRY. It was his suggestion that we pick that theme this year. And I think it's just so resonant given everything that's occurring in our country. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes the lack of respecting every other human being for being human, for being a person. You know, obviously the whole Black Lives Matter movement, et cetera, I think emphasizing that our tradition has a lot to say about that, you know, and that whether you're Jewish or you're not, whether you're white or you're Black, or it doesn't matter, we're all created in the image of God, and we all need to be respected. Yes. One of the concepts that I sort of developed when I was a teacher, teaching the books of the prophets. One of the ways that I like to express it to my students is that sometimes you respect a person not necessarily for who they are, but for what they are. And that means that, you know, a teacher, for example. So you might like the teacher, you might not like the teacher. You might think the teacher is particularly good at teaching you, you might not. You know, you might be resentful the amount of homework that teacher gives you. But regardless of who they are and whether you like them as a person, you respect them for what they are. They are your teacher, right? Your parents. Some parents are wonderful. Sometimes parents are not as wonderful, but they're your parents and you have to respect them for what they are. Well, that's true of every human being on the planet. You walk down the street and you pass by someone and you have no idea who they are. You couldn't respect them for who they are because you have no idea what their name is. You don't know anything about them, but you should automatically respect them for what they are because they're a human being.
Mm, that's beautiful. And it's interesting how you're right. It does resonate. And I'm sure, I mean, this is a concept of like tapping into the essence of humanity that has been around, you know, as long, I guess, as we've been around, yet we continually need to be reminded. And it's certainly especially important to have our religious leaders be kind of guides in helping us to all remember something that sounds so simple, but is something that we do need to be continually brought to, that concept and that idea of humanity, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
unfortunately
thank you.
True.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
I really appreciate learning more about you, your life, hearing about your grandmother, the work that you're doing at your school. And I really hope that I get to meet you in person one day.
That would be nice.
Yes, no, absolutely
Thank you.
would. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Gary Leslie. I am a member of the Middlesex County Black-Jewish Coalition, and I am very pleased today to introduce Edina Brown, who is a member of council in Old Bridge. Council Member Brown, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now, are you originally from Old Bridge?
No, I'm not actually. I'm from New Jersey originally, but Hillside. So Hillside is farther north. If we were to drive there right now, probably take about 25 minutes. So it's in Union County.
So how did you wind up in Old Bridge?
Well, I have been all around. My husband and I actually started dating and met each other when I lived in South Jersey and he lived in South Jersey. We lived in Mount Laurel. And then he got a job in New York and the job required him to move farther north. So it was the dead of winter and we had to find a place to move very quickly. And it was one of those, pop. And then we just ended up here in Old Bridge. So I'd never heard of it before then, actually.
So how long have you lived in Old Bridge now?
We're coming up on 10 years, I think in February. I can't believe it because it was not our original intention, but it was a very quick move. So we were like, you know what, we'll go here, we'll stay for a couple of years and we'll move before they get, too far into school, because we were just like, oh, we want to look around and really understand where we'd wanted to be long term. So,
and 9 or 10 years later, here you are, you remember?
Yeah. Well, a lot happened. My husband started a business with his friend. So we were like, let's wait a minute and see how that goes. And the business is going really great. It has been for several years. They have an engineering company. And so we're like, yeah, we'll wait.
So how did you wind up on council?
Well, I was really, one of the things I noticed like in the school system was there was diversity, but not diversity in educators themselves. So I saw like kids of different cultural backgrounds. We have a lot of students in our elementary school that's around the corner from my house that are South Asian. We have students from Pakistan. We have students from various regions in Africa. But I felt like there wasn't enough sensitivity to their cultures, and also from the leadership there in education. I said, oh, they seem a little not aware of how to deal with these students in a more, I don't like using the word tolerant, but I'd say in a more kind way in terms of what their culture is, because with having various cultures of children, some of them have to wear hijab. There's so much that goes on. So I actually was just looking to find out who was in charge of our principal's role there, who basically was his boss, which we now know, of course, is like the Board of Ed. But at the time, I really was just trying to figure it all out. So I kind of stumbled into politics because I thought that the Board of Ed and our local legislation was tied together, but they're not. Totally different entities. So, but I learned that too in the process. And so as I was doing that, there was a woman who was running for council. The previous councilman had just passed away. Unfortunately, he was very well loved. He was on the council for 27 years. Yeah. And, but she came in special election. And so I kind of helped with her campaign. And after that, I was asked numerous times to run for council because I showed up, I was friendly enough. And, I was very involved and I was very interested. I went to state events. I went to county events, every event that was on, I was just pretty much there. And so they were like, man, you're going to understand this stuff. Maybe you should do this, that's it.
You had said that one of the reasons you got involved in the first place was the lack of diversity in the educators and elsewhere. So how did you address that once you got on council?
Well, yeah, I was a little reluctant to run, but one of the reasons why I said, I'll go for it is, I do understand what's going on a bit, you can only understand so much in that amount of time. But also I knew that there would not be that much diversity represented on the council. Would I not have run? So I did it. And I am the only person of color on the council. I'm the youngest person, the only person of color. I'm not the only woman. I'm actually, one of four. But absolutely, I mean, I was driven to do it. I prayed about it. I thought about it. I spoke to other people that I, considered mentors at the time. And their advice was, it might be challenging, but do it, it will be a great opportunity. And I prayed more and I thought about it more. And then I said, okay, I'll do it.
Now, has it been challenging?
Well, we would have about 2 hours for that conversation, but absolutely it has been. I knew it would be though, so I'm not particularly shocked. I grew up in a pretty tough family, so I have like a thick enough skin to deal with it, even though it's still annoying. Like there's definitely times where I come home and I'm like, rah, rah, and my husband has to deal with those conversations. Yeah, my views are extremely different than the other 8 council members. So, I tend to be the lone wolf in a lot of my voting decisions and also just my opinions, my point of view of life. Yeah, vastly different.
Let's back up a second, because when we were talking prior to the interview, we were talking about stories that might have influenced us as individuals. And you mentioned one story that may or may not have had that influence when you were a child and you visited your father's family in Ghana. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that was a real hoot. So my dad's from Ghana, West Africa, specifically it's an area called Cape Coast, but we were visiting with my grandmom and she lives in a town called Tema. It's kind of like a village. I have not been there in ages, so it may look like a metropolitan city at this point, I don't know, but at the time it was not a metropolitan city, it was a village. And I just marveled at how different life was there. Like we were just allowed, my sister is about 2 years younger than me. At the time I was 10, she was 8. And I can't even believe I was ever that age. Anyway, but we were able to like run around through people's backyards, and a lot of the families there had like chickens, and there were goats just running around. And my dad, unlike when we were at home in New Jersey, he was fine. I mean, we wouldn't see him for hours, and we would just be traipsing about through different yards. And so one day in particular, I having the 10-year-old brain that I did and being very naive, I did know that this particular gentleman was a friend of my dad's, and I felt completely comfortable to just run off with him. Thank God. He was like a stable and decent human being, and I did not get kidnapped, but I ended up going off with him to like some little stores and getting candies and soda and everything. And I was just, living my life, having fun, and totally didn't tell anybody where I was going. I didn't tell my dad, didn't tell my sister. And this trip, we had been there 3 weeks to a month, something like that. And my dad and my sister are the ones that I came with. And so I'm, coming back into town and see my dad and people kind of gathered around, a little group of people gathered around there talking. And then I guess my sister finally sees me. She lays eyes on me from afar and runs up to me and grabs me and hugs me. And she's crying. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? I was just not understanding why there was so much chaos, and there were tears. And yeah, I got in trouble. My dad said, "Where were you?" And apparently he had gathered some people from the village to try to find me and look for me. They thought that I was like done, gone, kidnapped, somewhere that they would never find me again, which would have been extra horrible because my mom was still in the States. So my mom had trusted my dad to take us to this country for almost a month by himself. So, that story, although, I did say, I don't feel like it shaped my life, but I guess, one thing I do remember from then on is to always tell people where I am going. That's for sure. If I go out, I will tell, my husband, I'm going here, or I always text where I am, where I'm going. If I'm leaving, I do that. And I recommend everyone does that. But I think I learned that more from Lifetime movies. But but yeah, it was it was a really fun trip. But I definitely learned that my naivety was also still there.
Do you remember feeling any different when you came back from that? Do you remember thinking about it at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, my grandmother, she had I don't really know, I have to figure out the Ghanaian term for it, but essentially when girls there are about 9 or 10, they actually go and live with various families and act as their maid. So my grandmother had a 10-year-old girl, same age as me at the time. I was 10, she was 10, who was her maid, who had to clean her. And I was just blown away by that. So yeah, when I got home, before I got home, I realized how blessed I was. There were things that, I would want, or I don't have this, I don't have that. But I definitely got to see that my life was a blessed one, that I got annoyed when I had to do chores. My dad, we had to do chores on Saturday. Like you get a couple of minutes of some Saturday morning cartoons and then it's doing chores, but that was her life, So yeah, I learned that life is different.
So is there anything else that you took out of that experience?
Yeah, actually there is. I know one of the things I think about often is that like in our society, especially like American culture, it's very much valued, respected, and pushed, this idea of individualism, as soon as a kid is a certain age, out of the house, or, there's all these different individualism ideas that we, tout here in America. But one of the things I noticed there is how like the village and the community work together. And, if someone's not there or someone's missing, like everyone quickly works together. And obviously we see that happen here in the States as well, but I noticed like there's a lot more tight-knit community. So that is definitely something I learned, and how important and how special that is. But the other thing, I learned, which is kind of like a personal lesson for me, and I try to remind other people of this as well, is how valuable we are as individuals. And I know it's kind of a metaphor, if you will, if you think about it. Like I was lost. I'm wandering around aimlessly thinking nothing of it, you know, I'm in my own world, enjoying my little candies. And here, so many other people are, you know, worried about me. And it really kind of speaks to sometimes how much we don't realize our worth and our value to the people that love and care about us. You know, sometimes, you know, we're just in our own world and we don't realize how much we contribute to our community or to our circle of friends and family. So I definitely learned that as well. So I think it's a good thing I took away from it. Is there something that you bring to council now with that perspective? A lot of our council members vote in unison often. I'm actually the individual, so I can't really practice the community piece there with the other council members, but that's something that I have always been is different. And also, you know, I learned pretty young to just kind of say what I needed to say, because at the end of the day, if you try to follow what everyone else is doing, you're still not necessarily helping yourself or other people, you know? The way that you describe it, it makes it seem as if you've been that lone voice for a long time. Can you elaborate on that? A lot of times in our local town council, national issues come up. Right. There were some, you know, we've had like anti-immigrant discussions, the terminology used to describe people who were not born in this country. I also am vehemently against, but it's used very often in our council. So yeah, there have been times, my dad's an immigrant, as we know from our conversation. So, you know, that's been hard to keep quiet about. I think at this point now I'm like 3 years in, I have a little tune that I sing to myself. There's just different ways that I kind of am able to just bring myself down, because I feel like some of these conversations are dangerous. So that's when I get really fired up, because having conversations about, you know, being anti this or that, or anti anybody, especially when you have a position as a leader, is dangerous for your constituents, because our constituents consist of immigrants and people of all diasporas. So it is hard to keep silent. There's times where I speak up, but I've learned now to do it a little bit, I guess, in a calmer way. Can you name one thing that you're satisfied with or proud of in terms of speaking up, in terms of pushing for something on council? I think what I'm more proud of at the moment, honestly, is this group that I just started called the Bridge Coalition for Equality. I just started it in the spring after George Floyd was murdered, and there were so many people looking for like-minded, empathetic, caring people who are just like, we want inclusivity, we want to welcome this, we want to embrace this, because there were a lot of people here that didn't, you know? So it was really good to get those people together. So now we're on our third event. We're actually going to be feeding some families on Thanksgiving. Ironically, we thought we were going to get like an influx of all these people who wanted food, but we've just gotten a lot of donations and a lot of people want to help. So that's really exciting too, though, you know? Yeah. So we've got a lot of people that want to help. I've gotten community members involved who are just like so dedicated. So it's really good. And yeah, right now we're just Old Bridge, but I definitely want to expand it out, because my goal is really to develop ways to create unity in any town and in any, you know, region, because I think that is often lacking, especially now that we have so many entities that are working to divide. I'm looking for ways to get people to understand different races, religions, and cultures. So that's what we're doing. And we're actually going to be rolling out like something, it's going to be virtual, but it's going to be another way to help people understand each other and bring people together. So right now we do community service in the hopes that people in the community work together, regardless of where they're from. And you just kind of get to talk to people you wouldn't normally talk to. So that's what we do. That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Can you just give us some of the information about it? What's the name? Oh, yeah, sure. So we're at www.oldbridgece.org. We just community service. Like I said, this is our third event, the feeding Thanksgiving dinners to needy families in the community. And our first 2 events were community cleanups. So we cleaned up a local lake area park, and then also the beachfront in Old Bridge and Lawrence Harbor. So now we're doing the Thanksgiving meals. Our next events are going to be more cultural based, to teach people in the community about all the cultures that live in Old Bridge. So we'll have people speak, and we'll do that. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you.
Oh yeah, we're also on Facebook too. Sorry. So it's Old Bridge CE, and it's on Facebook. So if you just do @Old Bridge CE on Facebook.
Well, I think unfortunately that's all we have time for right now.
Oh,
I really do appreciate this. It's been great. Thank you so much for sharing the stories and your experiences. And we'll look forward to your, tracking your the rest of your career in council.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
All right, welcome everyone for tuning in. We have a special program for you guys. I'm Nick DeFreitas, one of the members of the Middlesex County Jewish and Black Coalition. Our program today highlights community building through storytelling, and we just want to highlight members of the Middlesex County community. We have an honored guest today. We have Rabbi Joe Bickhardt. Rabbi Joe has a mother who frequently attends council meetings in Highland Park. I think the first question, that I want to highlight is, what brought your family to Middlesex County, New Brunswick specifically? Was that intentional? Obviously, we kind of know your mother's story. Just kind of how did you guys land there?
That's a really good question. My parents came to New Brunswick. I want to say it was in 1956, 1957. They came from Vineland, New Jersey. Or they came from via Vineland, New Jersey. My mother, I think everyone knows, was on the St. Louis and made her way via New York to Cuba, back to New York. Met my father over in Israel in 1953, 1954. They got married. My mother's parents lived in Vineland, owned a chicken farm. When they came over in 1941, they settled in Vineland, and they were given a plot of land with chicken farms, and my grandfather, who was a lawyer in Germany, had become a chicken farmer.
Wow.
Don't know how it was obviously successful. My grandfather stayed on that farm until, I would say, 1960 or so, when he had a stroke, 1960-61, and he was forced to leave the farm in Vineland and live with my parents in New Brunswick. It might have been even later, 62, 63. That's basically how they got her. My father got a job. My father was very mechanical. My father's Holocaust story in itself is an interesting story for another time. But he was very mechanical, fixed almost anything, and got a job at New Brunswick Scientific, which was up on the top near Hal Lane, off 27. And stayed there till he retired in 1986. And I think New Brunswick Scientific actually closed its doors sometime shortly thereafter. He made pneumatic controls. He traveled around and installed those sort of things. And because he was in New Brunswick, the family moved up from Vineland, just closer to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would say, I was born in 59, and they were here, and around that time they lived in a house inside Dam Street. And just before I was born, 2 events happened. My grandmother and my mother's mother was killed in a car accident about 4 months in January of 59. I was born in April of 59. And around that time, they realized that they were out of space. I think at that time, they were already beginning to see that my grandfather, after the death of his wife, was going to be needing care and was going to eventually, they needed a bigger place. And they found a house on Power Street between Livingston and Joyce Kilmer. And they moved into that house, I want to say, probably a matter of days before I was born.
Oh, wow. That's a series of events.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how we ended up in New Brunswick, and I stayed in New Brunswick all the way up till high school, and then I went away to religious school down in Adelphia, New Jersey. And
nice.
So I was basically, then I left New Brunswick. I would say 1977. Came back in 78. Was here, worked for a while, not far from where my father used to work, up there, and then I moved to Chicago in January of 1979, and I make visits. And now I live up in Lords Valley, Pennsylvania, where I'm the rabbi of the congregation up here. Been here since 2001 in the Poconos, and it's absolutely great. But my mother still lives in Highland Park, and I'm usually in Highland Park and New Brunswick once a week. So
can't stay away, right?
Get rid of it. Can't get rid of it.
Awesome.
And I'm a huge Rutgers fan, so I mean, I'm really.
Are you, baby? Let's go.
Yeah.
So what was, like, I guess the next question I would have, obviously with the series of events before, kind of, moving out to Chicago and going to religious school, just like tell me your experiences of, the overall community, how the community welcomed your family, you personally, just like describe, New Brunswick, Middlesex,
it was very warm. It was a very warm community. It was a very interesting community. Almost, I would say 50% of my friends were African-American. Our teachers, I remember my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Gatling, and, who really motivated me with math and gave me, we had some African-American teachers in the New Brunswick school system. I went both to Roosevelt and Chester Arthur. I went to both. So both on Livingston Avenue. I didn't go to the high school. Both my sisters went to New Brunswick High School, where two of their teachers were really very instrumental. One was a woman named Mrs. Moody, who used to come to our house and eat dinner, and wonderful, wonderful lady. We just adored her. We adore her. I'll tell you something really off the record funny. It can't be off the record. Off the record. We had a guinea pig named Mr. Heiberger. For those of you who are old enough to remember New Brunswick High School in the 1970s, Mr. Heiberger was the principal.
Okay.
So we were very much into education. We hung out at the library. We went to reading courses. My parents were very heavily involved in education. My mother was a perpetual student at Rutgers till she was 88 and no longer could see. So we had both my parents were teachers and educators. We had a very warm knit community. After school, when I was going to the school in the corner, the school at Sanford Street and Livingston Avenue, I forgot the name of it, primary school, third grade. Herbert Middleton was my was my classmate. Wonderful African-American family. They babysat me for 2-3 years. We hung out all the time. Wow. There was never and as I told you before, there was never an issue in our family with anything called color and race. Two of our closest friends on both sides of our houses were deep Italian Catholics. They celebrated the holidays with us, and we celebrated with them. It was very, Power Street we had block parties, but they were indoors. This is before block parties became block. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody cared for everybody. It was really very, very close. And half the folks living on our street were African-American. We didn't have a problem. They were middle class. they were heavily protected by us as much as they protected us as much as we protected them. It was really quite amazing. And
Wow.
today, like I said, today, you know, two of my closest friends, and I have a brother who's African American. So, and my wife, my second wife, who I met in 2010, her closest friend, Dawn, is an wonderful African American woman, married a great guy named Ben. They have become extremely close friends. We're not naive. We know what's going on in the real world, but color's never been an issue for us, ever.
Wow. Now, do you feel like that intersectionality was only just a viewpoint of, like, you know, obviously, you know, of your family, but like how was that structured by design in that community? Were there programs that tried to build?
I think it was designed by my parents.
Wow.
My parents being Holocaust. My parents never said they were Holocaust survivors or Holocaust spectators, because they were really over. I mean, my father came over on the Kinder transport in August of 1939, basically 3 weeks before war broke out. My mother was on the St. Louis. So they were pretty much out of the war. Actually, my father was in the British Army, but that's a different issue. They were not in the same, they viewed themselves not so much as survivors, but spectators, and they never played the victim card. They never allowed us to play the victim card, being Jewish. And if we couldn't play the victim card, no one else was allowed to play the victim card. That was the beauty of New Brunswick. I remember being in the Cub Scouts, and the Cub Scouts, we met in the basement of the first Presbyterian church, second Presbyterian church on Livingston Avenue. And the Cub Scouts turned into Weeblos, and we would do projects, and we would meet every Monday night. And we had a project that we had to build like log cabins. I mean, small ones, not the big ones, obviously.
Yeah.
And there was a fire in the basement that destroyed the basement of the church. So we were displaced for literally 8 to 9 months. On every Monday night, every single Cub Scout parent offered their house.
Wow.
And we basically, kind of went around. So my parents, and we went to places where you would never know that people lived. It was, what happened, and that's how close the community was.
Wow.
And I remember, I was 8, 9, 10 years old when we had the race riots in 1960, 1969, 1967, somewhere around there, where the people went out of the houses going, I'm not concerned about this because that's not going to happen on my block. And it's not because I'm worried about being white. The African Americans living on our block were really not happy. And they were going to be in the front line saying, this is not acceptable here. When we had, the problem on the other side where we had whites who were coming in and complaining and demonstrating, it was the whites in our block that got up and said, that's not acceptable here. So and maybe we just lived in a community that was just special in the way they were. I can't speak for the rest of New Brunswick, but I can tell you, growing up, we never had a problem, and we never looked at barriers, and we never looked at color, and we never looked at religion.
Wow.
And maybe I'm the exception to the rule, but I can tell you, both my sister dated an African American Jew for many years, and he's now picked himself up. Of course, now he's 65 and living in Israel with a number of kids. But Danny Bibbins was a great guy. No one had a problem with him.
Wow.
And we brought him to synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue in downtown New Brunswick. When he walked with us to synagogue, heads turned.
I'm sure.
Heads turned, but not ours. And when they saw and he went to Rutgers as well. So when he came to synagogue, after about 2 weeks, it was like he was part of the Klan. And when he didn't show up, they'd go, "Where's Danny?"
Wow. Wow. I mean, just amazing stories and experiences that you kind of just shed light. And obviously, I'm sure people of New Brunswick and Middlesex are just happy to just hear that and that perspective of intersectionality, so I really appreciate that. One of the things I definitely wanted to, highlight, obviously you've been a part of the religious community. How did you decide you were going to become a rabbi? What motivated you? Was it just your experiences, or?
Oh, no, absolutely no. On the contrary, I was in the air conditioning heating business. I always had a good voice. I'm a cantor by trade as well, and I've always had a good voice. My father trained me very, very well. And when I went out to Chicago in 1978, I just come back from Israel, spent a year studying in Israel, and went out to Chicago. My late brother-in-law, Rabbi Robert Addison, who was actually the education director at the Highland Park Councilperson for a few years before he moved out to Chicago, called me 3 days before the High Holy Days. Said, "Look, our cantor just had a heart attack. I need you to get me from point A and point B in the services. I know you're 19 years old. I know you know how to do this. Get it done." And I've been working ever since. When as a cantor, and I got ordained, and I went everything, got involved in the appropriate organizations, and then in 2001, literally, I was in the car heading to the job interview here in Hemlock Farms when 9/11 happened. My job interview was the weekend after 9/11. As a matter of fact, I had to stop, and they wouldn't let me travel out of. I was in Lakeland, Florida, where I'd been a cantor. And when I got here, they said, "Well, we really want to hire a rabbi. And we see you've got like 2 years of credits. Why don't we pay for you to finish up your degree?" And that's basically what they did. So I didn't want to become a rabbi, but they paid me to become a rabbi, so I became a rabbi and been doing that ever since. But my main field was being a cantor and liturgical leader. But I went back to school and finished up. But in the meantime, also became an ordained chaplain and all these other things, all the accoutrements that come along with being clergy.
That's how life is. I mean, even though, like you said, this wasn't necessarily your first direction. Sometimes our story happens to have a path for its own, right? And I think you ended up in the right place, just given your experiences in New Brunswick, and just how you've been brought up through your family and your parents and the ideologies of that. I think it's a wonderful fit. Well, it's been an awesome time talking and hearing about your overall story and your experiences. We'll definitely try to somehow get you back in our future programs, because or even if it's just, just getting you once this is all over, COVID's all over, just together and just sharing a couple more stories on the side. But it's been a pleasure, and we definitely thank you so much for sharing the time. Awesome.
Anytime, Nick. Anytime. Anything I can do to help heal people and give people a little sense of that we're not all bad.
We hope you enjoyed our first event, the first in a series. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you know anyone in your community whose stories you think would be interesting to share in our next series, please share it with us. To get involved in MBJC or for more information, please email us at info@mbjc-nj.org. Thank you.